An insider reveals there's massive changes coming to the Pittsburgh Penguins, and we get a quote from a Team Sweden former coach saying that Erik Karlsson should not make the Four Nations teams. We're going to break down this and more later on this episode. Before we start, I just want to give a huge shout out to everyone that's subscribed. If you're part of the 91.3% and you're enjoying this daily NHL news, make sure to go down and hit that subscribe button. We'll be all season in the next offseason, giving you updates from around the league. But with that, Darius, we got to hop into what seems like the hottest topic in the NHL right now, and that is the Pittsburgh Penguins. I mean, we have a summary of an article wrote by a Pittsburgh Penguin insider going through everything with this team. We're going to go through and break some of this down. Starting off, you can see that the team won't go into a full rebuild with Crosby still playing. Management believes the run of poor play can't continue, and Dubas has made it known to other teams that everyone except for Crosby is available. I mean, Darius, looking at this, what's your initial thoughts on everything that's happening in Pittsburgh?
I mean, it's pretty mind-blowing if you think about it. Coming into this year, I thought the Penguins would be a lot better than they are right now. But unfortunately, I don't agree with that second point. That is, management thinks that the poor play can't continue. I do think it can continue. Their goaltending has been poor. The defense has been poor. And all of a sudden, they can't really score outside of their top guys. And their top guys are getting older. And the other mind-blowing thing that's come out over the last couple of days, including a trade that they made, which totally goes against, everything else that they're saying, is that everybody is on the table or available for trade besides Sidney Crosby, who just signed an extension. And it's pretty crazy. If you look at Malkin and Letang and these other guys that, could potentially be moved, you can't really move them. I mean, Ron Hextall left a bit of a mess for Kyle Dubas behind. And, I'm not going to go out and say Kyle Dubas is the best GM in the world or anything like that. We saw what he did with the Toronto Maple Leafs, which was not much. But, heading into this season, I thought that there would be some sort of game plan. And it still seems to me like they're kind of flying by the seat of their pants and trying to figure it out as they go. And it's been a bit of a disaster for the Penguins so far this year because they kind of put all their eggs in one basket. Crosby's still there, right? Like they're keeping all these guys and the team is not performing.
Yeah, the biggest thing is you're looking at just the cap for the team. There's so many guys getting up on age. I mean, Crosby's 37, Malkin's 38. You can work your way down to a guy like Rust and a guy like Raquel, who are both in their 30s, signed until 2028. This team is not getting younger, and with this team looking to kind of blow it up, but continue to contend with Crosby, what kind of value can you really get from some of these guys? I mean, Raquel is locked up for a long time, as I said. Russ is locked up. You have guys like Kevin Hayes that's locked up for the next 2 seasons at $3.5 million. These almost feel like contracts that, yes, a contender might go out and say, hey, we want a guy like Kevin Hayes on this team. But the bigger problem is the Penguins want more draft capital or more players versus draft capital. And going into Jussi and Lars Eller being traded, we've seen them acquire draft picks in the Eller trade instead of picking up NHL-ready defensemen. And I'll kind of just throw this to you as well, Darius, as just a question. Looking at this, if they were to go out and say, hey, everyone except for Crosby is available, and a team offers something for Malkin or Letang, do you think this messes up the team chemistry of this kind of right-hand man Crosby's always had?
I think it can. I think it could leave a sour taste in Sidney Crosby's mouth because he's signed here now. He signed that extension, and he really could have signed for maybe $11 million, right? Gotten that deal at the end of his career that he's earned, and he didn't do that, and he wants to continue to win. So now if they go ahead and trade a guy like Malkin or Letang, they're going to get a big return, first of all, if they do that, if they're able to pull that off, because again, they have no movement clauses, and Malkin is leading the team in scoring. He's been having a great season so far, but I think it could leave a sour taste in the captain's mouth, honestly, because he put all his eggs in one basket. He wants to stay a Penguin. He wants to continue to win. And whether or not he's in denial or not, if they move off of some of these other top guys, he could be pretty upset. And but I think that's the way they got to go, or try and make that happen. Because again, like I said, Ron Hextall left a bit of a mess for Kyle Dubas to clean up. But I think he's got to start cleaning it up. It's got to start with Malkin and Letang. I mean, they're not getting any younger, and you can get a lot for them. And I think they got to start heading in that direction. Younger, getting prospects, not just prospects, but draft picks. Start to rebuild. I think they got to start doing that.
And I mean, the biggest thing is we've seen Dubas in Toronto. He really let the players almost factor. Well, a lot of people said he let the players decide on a lot of things. So moving on from a guy like Malkin, moving on from Letang would change the narrative. But going into the defense itself, looking at this as well, you have an aging core of guys like Erik Karlsson at 34. He's signed for 3 years, including this year. Kris Letang signed until 2028, who is 37 years old. Ryan Graves, a guy like Pettersson. You can work your way down and it doesn't get younger. And it also leads back to this where Pettersson wants to re-sign with the team, but the Penguins won't talk an extension with him, which seems like Pettersson might be one of the players on the back end going out in a possible trade. But with this aging core, with Letang slowing down a tiny bit, Erik Karlsson's poor play, it seems like something has to change, and it almost feels like a huge dramatic change needs to happen, which does lead into the fact that we do have a report from Frank Cervelli talking about Erik Karlsson, a former Team Sweden head coach, talked out on a guy like Erik Karlsson and said his shortcomings in the defensive game are not too great in such a short tournament. And Darius, looking at this, there is a lot of speculation that maybe a guy like Erik Karlsson might not make Team Sweden. What's your initial thoughts or just overall thoughts on that?
I think there's a world where he does make Team Sweden based off of the name factor, right? Because I feel like this tournament may have a lot of that name value and a lot of GMs. I'm seeing it with Team Canada already, a lot of name value and some of the projected rosters. So I feel like there's a world where he could make the team in that way, but I'm not necessarily sure he should, because if you watch his game this season specifically, yes, he has 10 points in 17 games, which is not bad, but we know Erik Karlsson, what he does. We know what he's about. He's the offensive defenseman, right? But if you look at his defensive game so far this year, he gets beat on a lot of plays, and he's also making some very questionable decisions in the defensive zone. Off the rush, he's not, playing the other team's stars properly. He's playing 2-on-2s very weird. He's always going after the puck instead of letting the puck carrier kind of come to him. He's letting guys beat him off the rush wide, which is also very weird. He's always taking the inside, but he's not covering the outside. It's weird. I wonder if that has something to do with obviously his foot injury or his Achilles injury that occurred a couple of years ago. So I wonder if that plays into it as well. But on the defensive side of the puck, he has not been good. I don't know if he's been elite offensively either. So I feel like there's other guys. Obviously, Hedman's going to make the team, right? You have so many other defensemen to choose from that are better, have a better two-way game. And I think Erik Karlsson, this might have passed him by at this point, because as we can see with the Penguins this year, he's paid to be a difference maker. He was brought in to be a difference maker, and he's not that.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the cap hit and looking at the fact that we have a former Team Sweden coach talking about it, you can see that Karlsson has always been, and like you said, an awesome offensive defenseman. The defensive game has never been his strongest suit. We did see some solid years out of him in Ottawa, but the biggest problem with this is with his age, with his injuries, it's going to continue to slow him down. But overall, I think there is a high chance that maybe we won't see Erik Karlsson being on this Team Sweden team, which overall feels crazy to even say. If you looked at me a couple of years ago and said he'll never represent Sweden again, I would call you crazy. But looking at this, we also have the fact that the Penguins have buyouts, retains. We can see there's 2 salary cap retains with Jeff Petrie and a guy like Riley Smith, a buyout with Jack Johnson, with coming in just under $1 million. And the goaltenders, of course, we need to touch on the fact that they've been quite bad. I mean, a guy like Joel Blomqvist looked awesome for a stretch with the Penguins, but a guy like Tristan Jarry signed until 2028 at $5.3 million. Darius, overall, looking at this team, do you think they should go into a rebuild, or do you think they could kind of go on this quick on-the-fly route tool, move out a few guys, get a tiny bit younger, but still try to compete with Crosby?
I think this is a team that knew, and I feel like, myself just looking on the outside in, knew that they should have went into a rebuild already. This should have been a rebuild 2 years ago, last year at the latest. And again, they're coming into this year re-signing Crosby and continuing to do what they're doing. And I think they're heading in the wrong direction. I think they should get this rebuild going as soon as possible. When you look at their goaltending situation, like you said, it was looking decent earlier this year with Blomqvist as well. But obviously, if you look at Tristan Jarry this year, he hasn't been great. And even past seasons, there's a lot of question marks around this goaltender and a lot of question marks around his commitment as well. So it's just not a good situation in net. The defense isn't, a great situation either. Your core up front is getting very old. It's not getting younger, and it's quite old. So I think it's time for a rebuild in Pittsburgh. I think they should get this going as soon as possible. And I've been talking a lot about how Ron Hextall left a little bit of a mess for Kyle Dubas. I do truly believe that, but there are some moves like trading for Riley Smith that didn't work out, and then you trade him to the Rangers and retain salary. That's on Kyle Dubas. So it's a little bit of a mess in Pittsburgh right now, and I think they should try their hardest to get this rebuild underway, because I think fans are going to suffer for longer than they need to if they don't.
And I mean, the biggest thing is, I'm not saying go out and trade Sidney Crosby, but I will say, if Kyle Dubas went down to it and said, hey, Crosby, we're moving you to either Vancouver or Toronto. I know we'd both enjoy either one of those. But with them moving Crosby, you would get a absolute heist for a player like this. You could get absolutely the top prospect, multiple draft picks. Crosby is still one of the best players in the NHL. So Penguins fans, if a rebuild does happen, you will be in a good spot. But at the current situation, massive changes need to happen for this team to get out of the purgatory they're kind of stuck in of being a treadmill team. But what's your guys' thoughts on everything with Pittsburgh? What's your thoughts on pretty much all these points? The fact that guys like this are on the block, like Malkin, Letang, Karlsson. What's your thoughts on a possible rebuild, or do you like this team to compete? Let us know down in the comments. But I've been your host, Mark, with my co-host, Darius. Take care.